Joining me now is Don Brown, former Pentagon official and national security attorney. Take us back to August of 2021. What really happened behind the scenes as Kabul collapsed? And how did the most powerful government and military in the world allow the withdrawal to descend into that kind of chaos?
Well, thank you, Pierce. Listen, the real answer here has to do with the most colossal failure of civilian control over the United States military in the history of the Republic. 5 years ago, tomorrow, we lost 13 American service members, 11 Marines, one Navy corpsman, one Army soldier who were standing outside of Abbey Gate under very exposed circumstances with a cowardice, vapid commander-in-chief Joe Biden, who was pushing for artificial deadlines, to evacuate. He wanted us out first by September 11th. He moved that back to August 31st. And because of these compressed deadlines, the military was in a situation where these young service members were exposed and killed. It was the second deadliest day in the history of the Afghan war. 10 years earlier, there was Extortion 17, where we lost 30 Americans. It was a tragedy, and it deals with failed Democrat leadership over the military, and that's the answer to the question.
Don, we spent 20 years in Afghanistan. We lost thousands of American servicemen and women. We spent trillions of dollars. And today, the Taliban is back in power. Looking at Afghanistan 5 years later, what did we accomplish?
That's a very good question. What did we accomplish? I mean, our stated goal in going into the war on terror was first to go after the Taliban, but to take out Osama bin Laden. Osama bin Laden was taken out in 2011, and yet we stayed there another 10 years. And to what extent? And then when we left, we took no spoils of war. We had every opportunity to maintain forward deployed air bases in Kandahar and at Bagram. We turned that all over to the Taliban, at least $7 billion worth of hard equipment, including Black Hawk helicopters and weapons. Now you have that savage government back in power, treating women like animals. Yeah. The International Criminal Court, we are not a member, and I'm glad for that, but it's called for the arrest of the Chief Justice of the so-called Taliban or Afghan Supreme Court now. It was a colossal waste in the end. And the way Joe Biden pulled us out and the way those 13 service members were killed there at the end, he's got blood on his hands. Lloyd Austin has blood on his hands. And the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Mark Milley, all have blood on their hands. Yep. Austin Milley should have had the guts to resign when they saw the danger that our troops were being put in. We pulled out of Bagram on the 30th of July. You asked about August. It really started at the end of July. We didn't pull out of Bagram, which forced us to have to evacuate, out of the civilian airport, Pearson, there at Kabul, which was not fortified or safe.
Secure. No.
It was a disaster on top of disaster, and the moral of the story is this: never put Democrats in charge of the United States military. Never, ever, ever again.
You'll never put them in charge of anything, frankly. 13,
Absolutely.
13 Americans were killed at Abbey Gate tomorrow. Yeah. Americans and Afghan allies were stranded. Billions of dollars in American equipment were left behind. How is it possible that 5 years later, virtually really no senior official or anyone has been meaningfully held accountable?
Well, we have to hold them accountable. The House and Senate Armed Services Committee need to hold, Lloyd Austin accountable. They need to hold General Milley accountable. These were the senior commanders. Milley wasn't civilian; he may as well have been, but they were the commanders in Washington, D.C., who bought into Biden's wokeness and were executing him.
Well, you're right. They need to be, but they haven't. And why haven't they?
Because the United States Congress, frankly, doesn't have the guts to make it happen. And the Armed Services Committee should call them in. I was very proud of my friend Pete Hegseth, our now Secretary of War, when he went after, some of those senators who issued that, ridiculous video trying to encourage our young service members to disobey lawful orders, including Mark Kelly.
Yep.
But we as Republicans do too much talking and not enough
Not enough
action.
action. Yep.
And if we don't take action, we subject our fighting forces to these types of vulnerabilities in the future.
Yep.
And I would encourage the armed services committees to do something. And you ought to strip the rank from General Milley. You ought to, and Lloyd Austin as well.
I think the punishment should be much harsher, but that's the conversation for another time. So 3 days after Abbey Gate, the Pentagon carried out a drone strike that it claimed that was, a successful attack on ISIS, but it turned out the target was an aid worker and 10 civilians, including 7 children who were killed. It's awful enough that we lost our service members, but for me, one of the worst aspects is that children were murdered for nothing. Do you believe that this strike was based on real intelligence, or do you think that Biden was trying to cover his butt and make it look like he was taking decisive action?
Oh, clearly the latter.
Yeah.
He knew something was coming, and here he is. We carried out a drone strike and punished the perpetrator. Hey, listen. These Marines were being pressed out to the outer perimeter of this airport, the civilian airport. We had military intelligence that ISIS was about to bring about a strike. We left Abbey Gate open and made them vulnerable to murder. It is Biden whose shoulders bear the responsibility for these deaths, and Lloyd Austin and General Mark Milley and their immediate subordinates. Those are the ones we ought to be going after, not some sort of bravado strike in the middle of the night so that Biden can brag that he's got the perpetrator, when in fact he himself is the perpetrator for the foolishness that he displayed as the so-called commander-in-chief of the armed forces.
Don Brown, former Pentagon official and national security attorney, thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. God bless.
God bless you.